Hi, I'm Michael Johnson. Good to be with you guys. I am four-time Olympic gold medalist, eight-time world champion, former world record holder, 200 meters and 400 meters, and currently BBC sports pundit, which most of you probably know me in that role as of late. Since my retirement back in 2000, I've been doing that in that role with BBC. So glad you guys were able to get some good questions over. I've reviewed them, and hopefully I'll be able to answer all of the questions for you guys. So without further ado, we'll just get right into it. First question, who were your heroes growing up, and were they the ones who inspired you to get into track? Good question. My hero growing up was my dad, actually. And my dad, sort of taught me about hard work, which certainly came into play as I became an athlete. But also my dad always, what I admired about my dad and what I wanted to emulate in him, that I saw in him and emulated myself, was that he always seemed to be in control. And we had some difficulties as a family, finances and things like that. But my dad always had a way and always figured it out. And I always wanted to be in control like he was. And so that probably is what caused me to end up being a control freak, which worked a little bit in my career because I wanted everything the same. I wanted to be in control of the things that I could control in my career, which I think served me well, because what that also consequently did was caused me to not focus so much or care about the things that I couldn't control. So like my competitors, I can't really do anything about how they're going to run. Can't control what happens in their lane. I can only control what happens in my lane. So I was only focused on that. In my race preparation, I knew that was a contributing factor to whether I win or not, and I could control that. How well prepared I am for the race certainly is going to contribute to whether I win or lose, and I can control that. So my dad was my hero growing up. As I got into track more as an athlete, as a young athlete, even in college and even in high school, Jesse Owens became, as I started studying the great sprinters of the past, initially just because I wanted to see, I was a sprinter, and who were the great sprinters in the past and what did they do? And I came across Jesse Owens and then started to get into his story and who he was as a person, and was just fascinated with Jesse Owens. And I thought greatest athlete of all time, and I still believe that. So that was my hero growing up as a track athlete. So next question. Outside of the 200 meters and 400 meters, which event would you have liked to take part in? That's a good question. An interesting one for me, because I was a 200 meter runner. That was my event growing up. Once I went out to university, I was a 200 meter runner. And if you had asked me then as a 200 meter runner, and keep in mind, most athletes are a single event performer. My situation was different. Obviously, we know at this point, I became a double event performer to 200 and 400, but I was a single event performer as well for the longest time, 200 meters when I was developing. So if you'd asked me then, what other event would you have run other than the 200? What event would you like? It would have been 400. And I got the chance to do that. And once I started doing that, then I became best in the world at it. So I got to run the events that I wanted to run. There were no other events in the sport of track and field that I really, really wanted to run. The 200 and 400, when I first started in my professional career, those were two events that people typically did not put together. So it was a bit unorthodox, but it was what I wanted. And I knew that I had the talent in both events as well. And so I pursued them both and got a chance to participate in both events. Obviously, with that being a bit unorthodox, that double, it was difficult competing in both events at championships. And early in my career, I had to choose one. So 1991, as an example, I chose the 200 meters. 92 Olympics, I chose the 200 meters. 93 World Championships, I chose the 400 meters. It wasn't until 1995 that I was able to compete in both at the same championship. And that was born out of the fact that as I was sitting at these championships where, you know, I won the 200 meters, and then I'm sitting in the stands watching the 400 meters and thinking, I should be down there. I should be in that race, because I was just racing against all of those people on the circuit, and I'm probably going to be ranked #1 in the world again this year, but I can't participate and be world champion, and vice versa. Likewise for the 400, the 200, when I was competing in the 400 and watching someone else win the 200, that was very painful. So I was very pleased when I was able to do both. And I was at my best when I was running both. I was faster in the 200 when I was running 400s due to the strength work that comes from being a 400-meter runner. And I was better in the 400 when I was also running the 200, being able to bring the speed from the 200 over to the 400. So yeah, I was very lucky to be able to compete in both events that I wanted to. What one race do you regard as one of your best outside of the 2 gold medals that you won in Atlanta? So obviously, 1999 world record in the 400 meters. I was chasing that record for years. When I first ran under 44 seconds in 1991, I knew at that point that I had the potential, 1992, sorry, that I had the potential to run under 44 seconds. And it took another 7 years before I actually broke that world record. I got close many times, and it was just a matter of trial and error in races and having to really work on the race and figure out where can I shave off time. But ultimately, I was able to break that world record in 1999. So that was one of my best races. Probably in the 200, that was my best 400. 200 meters, obviously, again, so you said outside of the 2 gold medals I won in Atlanta. I had some, I mean, there were a few. I think 1997 World Championship is one of my favorite races. That one, I was injured. I probably shouldn't have even been out there. I had been injured for a couple of months, hadn't run any races. My training had suffered, but I thought I could still win the World Championships. I got to the World Championships. The first round, I qualified for the quarterfinal. The quarterfinal, I was an automatic qualifier for the semifinals and had to wait until the other round finished and see if I got in on time. I did. I was next to last qualifier to get into that semifinal. Because just with the injury, I was trying to manage the injury and things just weren't going right. But I knew that I could still win. And in the final, with 150 meters to go at about 250 meters into the race, my quad, which is what I had injured, pulled on me again. And I felt it go, and I started to slow down thinking, okay, the race is over. And just as I was starting to slow down, it went away. It released, and I felt like I could run again. So I started running again. By that time, I'm in 7th place with 150 meters to go. And I still won that race. And I'm the 1997 world champion. So that was one of my favorite races, and probably one of my best, because it was all mental. It wasn't physical. I just knew what I needed to do and had the will to be able to do it. And probably a little bit of a benefit of sort of having that armor of, well, that's Michael. We can't beat him. So there were probably people in that race that probably should have beaten me, but didn't believe that they could because they had never beaten me. So that winning streak and that sort of era of invincibility is very important, and I always knew that. So I tried to protect that at all costs and make sure that I won every race and that I was always ready when I went out there to race, so that I could continue to have that era of invincibility, because it certainly helps. And it came in good use that day. All right, next question. So, do you think that athletics should follow the International Swimming League model, where athletes are part of a team at meets rather than competing purely for themselves? I mean, obviously, there's a lot of conversation right now around what should happen with athletics in order for the sport to improve. Um, Following the swimming league model, probably not the best example. To be honest, I wasn't even aware of that before I saw this question. So I looked into it, and that league has been fraught with problems from the very beginning. So probably not a model to follow. I think that what athletics needs is to figure out, what's its identity. If this is going to be truly a professional sport outside of the Olympic Games and World Championships, then that's a different model that is not so much focused on and prioritizing inclusivity, events of all sorts and the multitude of different types of skill sets that it takes to participate in the sport, and so many different events and so many different athletes at all different levels. You can't do that and truly be a professional sport. You have to prioritize either the product as a profitable and popular product, which is what professional sports do, or you prioritize inclusivity more of in a sort of democratic sort of model where it's all about, hey, more athletes are better, everyone is treated equal, no one's going to get a lot, but everybody's going to get a little. So I think that with track and field, it has to figure out which one of those models it wants to follow. Currently and in the past, it's always sort of had 1 foot in one and 1 foot in the other, and that is a problem and makes it very, very difficult. In terms of, so the swimming league is a team model, that could work for track and field, for athletics, but would need to be done right, and would call for a complete overhaul. What you currently have is a very, very crowded and confusing and convoluted calendar and structure of the sport. So adding another element to all of that already exists is probably not the way to go. You need to either streamline and clean up some of the things that are already existing, or completely overhaul the sport and get rid of all of that other stuff and become this. But trying to, again, have 1 foot in one, 1 foot in the other is probably not the best way forward for the sport. All right, next question. How excited are you by Erriyon Knighton, and what can he achieve in his career? Are the comparisons to Usain Bolt and yourself fair? Erriyon Knighton is very exciting as a prospect. And I say that then to emphasize that he is still a prospect at 18 years old and still a senior in high school. He hasn't even finished high school yet, and he's already run one of the fastest times in the history of the 200 meters. And he made the Olympic team as well. So obviously huge potential, realizing that potential and ultimately getting to a point where he can even be considered as a Usain Bolt or someone like myself in the sport who's won gold, multiple medals and broken world records. He'll need to transition to the senior level of the sport. He's going to bypass, or he has bypassed the university level, which can be beneficial to a lot of athletes, but some athletes don't need it. And by all indications at this point, given what he's accomplished, he probably doesn't need to go through the university or collegiate model, and can transition nicely into a professional career, but will need a lot of guidance. We saw Noah Lyles do that and do it successfully. And I think Erriyon Knighton can do that as well. But whether or not he can ultimately become, a Usain Bolt type or a Michael Johnson type star in the sport, he certainly has the potential, but it'll be exciting and interesting to watch and see if he can realize that potential. I see no reason that he can't, but we've seen it in the sport, athletes come into the sport with that type of potential and for various different reasons not realize that potential. It'll be exciting to see, but he is certainly an exciting prospect, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he does this year. Let's see, what was your favorite training session? Training for me was not about fun at all. That's not to say that it wasn't fun, but what was fun about training was and for me, the focus was getting better, getting learning, improving, being ready to go out there and win medals and break records. So those sessions that gave me the indication of where I was in my training and where I am at the moment, and how I'm progressing were the ones that I most look forward to. And so one of the sessions that we would do on a weekly basis was a series of the core of that training session was a series of 350-meter sprints, usually 3 of them, with very minimal rest, sometimes as little as 2 minutes rest. That was a very difficult training session, but when I did really, really well in that session, I knew that I was ready. And typically, I got a really good understanding of exactly where I was and what I was capable of based on how I actually performed in those sessions. Okay, next session. Okay, so next session. Do you believe you would have beaten Donovan Bailey in a 150-meter rematch? Of course. I mean, there's not a race that I ran in my career that I didn't believe that I could win. And that's not based just on sort of blind confidence. That's based on my confidence always came from, proof of what I was able to do when I proved to myself, just like those training sessions that I just described. When I had those training sessions where I was able to prove to myself that I'm truly ready to do something special. That's where my confidence came from. And and also from the fact that, my record speaks for itself. And at that point, my record has spoken for itself, where when I'm healthy, I'm ready to go, and I enter a race, I win. So I have no reason to believe that any other races, including that one, that I would have been able to enter and finish and go into it healthy, that I wouldn't win. Same question I'm often asked about these days, or in the past, about Usain Bolt. If you were racing Usain Bolt, who would win? Of course, I'm going to say I would win, and of course I believe I would win. And I've asked him that question, and of course he said he would win. And I would expect nothing less. I wouldn't expect him to say, "Oh, yeah, Michael, you will win," and he wouldn't expect me to say, "Oh, I think Usain will win that race." That doesn't work that way. If you're a champion and you believe in your ability, and you've gone out there and proven that not only to others but also to yourself that you can deliver when it counts, you're always going to believe you can win. All right, next question. Do you have any superstitions or rituals that you do in the build-up or just before a race? I don't. I'm superstitious. I was always superstitious against superstitions and rituals, because then you're sort of depending on luck. Like if I've got a lucky pair of socks, and it's like, I always win when I wear my lucky socks. If on race day I can't find my lucky socks, then I'm destroyed from a confidence standpoint, and I don't want that. I always rely solely on my preparation, my training. That's where my confidence came from, not from any sort of luck or superstitions. My philosophy was always make your own luck, and you have an opportunity to make your luck every day with training. So I looked at training and every day of training as an opportunity to be ready for the moment and be prepared for the moment. And I didn't want to squander any of those opportunities. So even on the days when I really didn't feel like training, or the training session was so difficult, or you got one more rep left and it's just, you just want to go home, I gave everything on those days. I never, ever, and still to this day, don't like weight training. It was something that I just didn't like doing at all. I love being at the track running. But weight training days, I got in there, I gave everything that I possibly could, even though I hated every minute of it, because I knew that it was going to help me to be better and be ready for the moment. So that's how you create your own luck, by doing the things that you really don't want to do, giving just as much effort and and commitment to the things that you don't want to do as you do to the things that you do want to do. I often joke though, when people ask me that question, if I had any rituals, I always say, my ritual was to make sure that I'm standing on top of the podium after every race. That was my habit. Fortunately, I was able to be consistent with that one. Always standing on the top. All right, next question. I had a heart attack back in December. What was the biggest factor during your rehabilitation from a stroke and getting back fit and well again? Great question. So 2018, I had a stroke. I was in really good shape at the time. I will always maintain my conditioning and training regimen even after I retired, keeping myself in good shape. I always eat healthy, always have. Probably better now even than when I was competing. No real history in my family of stroke. My mother did have a stroke, but that was a different situation. No real natural sort of history of stroke in my family. So it was surprising that I actually suffered a stroke, and I had just finished doing a training session in my gym at my house when I started experiencing this weird sensation where I was having trouble walking, having trouble getting coordination on my left side. And really I only went to the hospital out of an abundance of caution, thinking when I get there, they're going to say, oh, something minor. And it got progressively worse, and turned out I had suffered a stroke. And probably 15 minutes, 20 minutes after I arrived at the hospital, I could no longer walk and couldn't stand. And couldn't move my fingers on my left side, couldn't do that, I couldn't do anything with my left side. My left hand, my left arm was having trouble moving, all sorts of weird stuff, but basically like paralysis. And I was told that I'd had a stroke, so that was a really shocking diagnosis and very scary. So of course, my immediate question was, am I going to be able to walk again? Because I couldn't walk, I couldn't stand, couldn't do anything on my left side. And doctors told me that only time will tell, to go into sort of a intense rehabilitation here in a few days. And some people recover, some people don't. There are varying degrees to that recovery, and only time will tell. That was obviously very scary, but I did recover, made a full recovery in a few months. But I did have to truly learn how to walk again. And it's interesting when you hear people say after a surgery or something on their ankle, I had to learn how to walk again. Well, you really didn't have to learn how to walk again, because your brain and the connection to your leg, your foot, and all of the different joints, that connection was never severed, and it continues to remember those things. In my case, that connection was severed, because deep in the left side or right side of my brain where the stroke happened, when those arteries were no longer getting, or vessels were no longer getting blood, that connection was severed. And so I had to truly learn how to walk again. And that was a process, but it was due to all of the things that I learned when I was an athlete, that I was able to apply to that rehabilitation and training, and really just throw myself into and commit to. Again, the same thing, just like when I was competing, like every day is an opportunity for me to get back to my livelihood, get back to where I was prior to this stroke. And that was the greatest fight and battle of my life, far more important, obviously, than any gold medal or any world record that I was training for before. But certainly that experience as an athlete was what I attribute my ability to recover fully and quickly to. So last question here. If you could choose 3 athletes to join you in a 4x400 meter team at your peak, who would you choose and why? That's a funny question. That's hilarious, because while I didn't get a chance to choose them myself, at my peak, I did get to run with 3 athletes who I probably would have chosen. Butch Reynolds, 1993, we broke the world record, which still stands today, 254.29. World Championships, we broke the world record. Butch Reynolds, who was the previous world record holder, he was still the world record holder at that time until I broke it in 1999. But Butch was on that team as the world record holder. I was on that team as the current world champion. Quincy Watts, who was the current Olympic champion in 400 meters at that time, was on that team, and Andrew Valman. So that was a great team. If I had to choose, I would only change one of those. I would have put Steve Lewis on that team. Steve was injured that year, but he was the 1988 Olympic champion and 1992 Olympic silver medalist. And in 1992, the year prior to that 93 team, he was on the team with Quincy and me. And that year it was someone else. So Butch wasn't on that team. Andrew Valman was on that team as well. So that would be the only change I would make to that 1993 team. So essentially, I got the chance to do exactly what you asked in your question, run with. I mean, I wouldn't have chosen anyone different for those teams. I mean, those guys were the best. We were all the best in the world at that time. So I got the chance to run with those guys, and it was amazing, and evidence of that was the best team that I could have assembled is the fact that that world record still holds today.